Alright, this is the online lecture walkthrough of Music Mixing Project. So, for this, you'll want to come to the Cambridge Analytica website. You can find this in Assign for Class 9. There is the link to the Cambridge Multitracks. You're going to want to find one that you like, and you're going to want to press the play arrows and get an idea for what the song sounds like. And when you find one that you like, go to the full multi-track. It'll tell you how many tracks there are, and you can just go ahead and click the file size and it'll start a download for you. So I already have this downloaded. I'm going to create a new session, call this my name, and then music mix project. And I got 48 and 24. It's interleaved, and I will click create. It'll prompt me for my location. Just save this to the desktop. Boom, done. And first thing we're going to want to do, import all of our stems. Come to download, where I have my stems downloaded. You're just going to drag all these in, click, drag, go to convert. These were recorded at 44.1. We work at 48 in this class. Click open. Save it to our audio files. And while this processes, so the idea for this is we're just going to set ourselves up to have a rough mix where we can have a rough balance for leveling and panning. So we're going to be adjusting volume, or we're going to be adjusting panning. We're going to color code, name, place markers, get a click track in the grid going for ourselves, and we're just setting ourselves up so then we can begin the mix. We're going to want to be able to hear everything and get an idea of what's going on and get a little organization going. So first thing I'm going to do is just listen to everything that we got going on. You can select the first one, just select your track. Shift S is going to solo. Click play. So we got a little drum loop. And then this is probably going to be a kick. We'll select the other track, Shift S. It unsolos the previous one and solos this one because in options, solo mode, we have XOR, which cancels the previous solo. Click play. That is a kick. I do not like the little numbers at the beginning, and some of these are going to be labeled a little differently than I would like them to be, so I'm just going to go through each of them. This will also give us a chance to figure out what's going on in the song, what kind of samples we have available to us, and what tracks we have going on. It's also potentially a good idea to just click play and kind of hear what the song is. Things are going to be super out of balance if I click play. We got mostly organ. So we can make a couple quick adjustments, but we could also just go in track by track and just kind of get an idea of what the bones are that we're working with. So we got snare here, we got a cowbell, shaker. This is called sample. This is kind of like a vocal chop. We got bass. We have a sub bass. This is like some kind of synth bass. You could also call this some kind of like break bass, because it's just going to be in this little like break or bridge section area, just visually. Electric guitar 1. This is an electric guitar. Electric guitar 2. Outro solo. We got an acoustic guitar. Little Take Me Out to the Ball Game organ. Got some synth stabs.
Saudade.
and our lead vocal. So now that we have all these named and we have an idea of what's going on, then we can just organize them a little bit. I'm going to start by color coding these. I'm going to make my drums green, my aux percussion somewhat similar color, my bass make it red, and generally I'm making my instrumentation the same colors every single session I do, so when I open up different sessions, just visually I have a better idea of what's going on. And always bugs me when things are not named correctly. And this is just so it's like pretty consistent across any project that I do. I can just open up anything and just visually I already kind of know what's going on. And I will also put my drums up top, then my bass, and then some more rhythmic instruments like electric guitar, and then keys and synths, and then I'll do all my vocals and then backing vocals below that. For this, it's a little bit more of a sparse instrumentation. And then we can go ahead and start routing some of this. So there's a couple different ways that we can go about doing this. We can use routing folders or aux tracks. I'll start by showing you routing folders. So if we select what we want, we have our little drums group here, and we can even make a little group for them using Command G, calling them drums. Now we have a group where we can control the volume of each of these together. And before we even do any balancing or panning, I would just do my routing just right off the bat. So you can select them, select the first one, hold shift, select to what you want, and right click. You can go to move to new folder. It will probably start you off here at basic folder, but you can switch this to routing folder. It will be stereo. You have this option, you can route tracks to the new folder. This will automatically change the outputs of your tracks to the input of the routing folder. So this makes it easier if you just select this. We can call this drums. If we click enter, you can see that it automatically routes our tracks here to the input of the routing folder called drums. And we can change the color of this as well to match. And so now if, I had to turn my groups off, solo the kick, now it is coming into our routing folder and output 1, 2 out of the folder. And so now all these drums are being sent into this folder. We can also collapse this if we don't want to look at the drums anymore. This is the nice thing about the folder. Alternatively, I'll delete this. You have the option to either keep the tracks inside or delete them. We will want to keep them. Don't want to delete your tracks because that can't be undone. You'd have to open up a previous session file back up. We could make a new aux track. You can come to stereo aux input. Alternatively, you can hold command and go up or down. This will change the kind of track you're going to create, and then left and right will change the stereo width. And we can call this drums. So this will create a new aux track for us. And we can go ahead and just highlight, option shift, everything that is selected, and we can change the output. We can come to track and then drums, and it will give us a new output, a new bus, and corresponding to the input of this aux track. One thing to note, if we solo this kick, we are not hearing anything, and that is because we need to solo save this. We have this soloed, so we'll get this little like grayish red over the mutes for any track that is not soloed, as well as this aux track. But if we hold command and click the solo button, it will undo that. And solo save means this track is now ignoring any solos that are occurring. It's not going to mute by default. And so now we can solo different things and see that they're coming into this aux track. Cool. There's also one other way to make an aux track. If we delete this, we can highlight the tracks we want to send it to, option shift, everything that's selected, come to new track, and we can call this, drum bus just for the purpose of this, but it will ask us what kind of track we want to make. By default, it will be a stereo aux input. Click create, and then it will automatically route. Now our output is called drum bus, which corresponds to the name here. And this just kind of speeds up the process. Instead of making an aux track and then routing it, we can just go to our output, get a new track, and it will make the aux track and route it for us, similar to how it does with the routing folder. But again, we want to command solo save this, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that quickly for each of my groups. New track, aux perk, come down here, I will make this my bass bus, then we've got guitars, I've got keys, and I have vocals. Even though the vocals only has one track, this still gives me another layer of control, because I'm gonna come in here, chop up this with some clip gain, even it out, and maybe in some spots I want to automate the volume, but maybe I commit to volume automation, because if you remember, once we write automation, we can no longer change it globally, because as soon as we click play, the track will go back to reading the automation that we have written, all of the automation data. And so now we have our automation data written on this, but say we want more vocals or less vocals compared to the track, instead of having to move all that automation data up or down, now we have a second layer of control where our vocal track is being sent to this vocals bus, and we can just increase or decrease the volume here of our vocals, and the automation is untouched. So I will move all of these to the top. Holding command, I can select and skip some tracks, command and clicking, I can skip around and then pull all these to the top. Everything I had selected will come with me. Option Shift Command, everything that is selected, and then the command solo save option, I can just click and it will solo save all of these. And now I can change the colors of these, and I will then send all of my instruments to another bus. I will call this my instruments bus. I will spell instruments right. And then I can send my instruments and my vocals to a submix. And again, this is giving me more layers of control of my mix. Move my submix to the top, and I'll change the color of this and this. Just visually, solo save these, and now I have all of my instrumentation coming to a single instruments bus, and then now I have my vocals and my instruments all summed down to just 2 buses, which I have then summed into a submix. So now I can do processing on the entire mix itself, and I can control the balance of the vocals versus the instrumentals, and do different kinds of side chaining against them and more advanced stuff now that I have it routed like this. And again, this just gives me multiple layers of control. I'm just summing things down in parts. So I'm grouping all my tracks, having them sent to individual buses, and then I'm summing all of those into just instruments versus vocals, and then everything down to a single submix, which and then I can process the entire mix with things like compression, different kinds of tape simulation, imaging, saturation, things like that, which will give me a more modern sound. Cool. And now that we have all that set up, we can go ahead and also create a click track. This is like an R&B type of song. So things are going to be to a grid. Just go ahead and make this small for now. And I can also make a master fader. So when you create a master fader, it comes in as master fader 1, because you can have multiple master faders for different outputs, because some devices have the capability of having lots of different kinds of outputs. For this, we're using a pair of external headphones, and so I'm only going to need outputs 1, 2. And this just gives me a little meter that I can read to make sure I'm not clipping for my entire mix. All right. And I'm going to switch myself to bars and beats. I'm going to get a little rough balance going first, and then I'm going to find my tempo and place some markers to denote the sections of the song. to give myself a little bit more organization. First thing I'm noticing as well is there's a lot of dead space in the beginning. I'll turn metronome off. So I don't need this. I can go ahead and just select the all group over here on the side, and when I click, it will affect every single track. I'm just going to trim this beginning down a little bit and add a little fade to everything, and that's just to kill some of the dead space that happens where nothing is occurring. I'll go ahead and start balancing all of these. There's a couple ways to do this. There's no right or wrong. It's really whatever works for you. So you can just leave everything in and just press play and then try to balance it with everything going at once, because you know, everything is going to be playing in the end anyway. So the idea is like make a balance of like everything all at once. You can also just start in like the busiest section where everything is playing and try to work that way. Generally, what works for me is I will try to build up in sections. So I'll start with individual tracks. You know, I'll start with like my kick, my snare, the drums, and then I'll move and then add in the bass, and then I'll add in other rhythmic instruments like the guitar and the organ. The organ is really probably going to play a role in this of just filling out the spectral content, but you know, then I'll add that in, and then I'll add in more melodic instrumentation like the guitar solo and the lead vocals. And also, this is not the only way to organize it. You could, you know, leave your buses like among your tracks. You could have your bass bus here, your aux percussion here, your electric guitar here, like mixed in with your tracks themselves. You could put all of this at the bottom, all the way down here, and it's whatever makes sense to you visually. Cool. So I'm going to start with a little bit of balancing. Let me throw my headphones back on. So I'm going to just solo the kick, and then I'll add in the snare. And then add in the drum loop. Alright, and I'll add in the bass. Electric guitar, and just holding shift and clicking another solo. I'll add in this second electric guitar. And so this is the first time I'm going to want to start panning. I'm just going to get this off of the other guitar. The two guitars are going to live in the same frequency spectrum, like areas of the frequency spectrum. And so they're going to be masking and fighting each other. So one easy way to avoid that is just panning them off each other and giving themselves their own little space in the stereo field. So I'm going to start by pulling this second electric guitar off to the right a little bit, and you could pan the first guitar as to the left as well, but I'm already seeing that there are some synth stabs that are kind of corresponding with this second electric guitar, so maybe I'll just start by adding these in and then panning these to the left and seeing if I can get a little balance while keeping this first electric guitar in the middle. And this is where a lot of creative decisions are already coming into play. There's no right or wrong answers to some of these things. Generally, you will want to keep your main focus elements like kick, snare, lead vocal, bass, dead center. The bass and the kick, especially because you want your low end anchored in the middle. Again, these aren't like hard set rules, but 99% of music you listen to will have things like the bass and the kick and the snare like dead center. And the vocals will be more centered because oftentimes the vocals are like the main interest point, especially to the average listener. Um, and yeah, you don't want your low frequency in the sides very often. You want that dead in the middle because your center point and your center channel or your phantom center in stereo imaging, if you have a left and a right, you're gonna want that like anchored. You don't want that like floating around. You want that pretty solid, and usually you just keep that dead in the middle. So let me add in these synth stabs. And they are coming in hot, so I'm just going to bring them down and get a little balance. Cool, and these are more of like an accent to me, or like first impression, so I'm going to back it up a little bit, see how that come in. Cool, and I can smooth all that out later with things like reverb and different effects. So I'll add in the organ next. It should fill out like a lot of space. Cool. And I'll start in adding these other bass parts. That is really loud. Yeah, and this organ is playing a role of just like filling in space for me. It's not super interesting. It's just kind of there filling out a lot of spectral content. So I don't need this very loud. Like I'm bringing this down like -17. And there's just like a lot of bass in some of these like sub things. So, this could even stand to come down a little bit more. And I'm just trying to get everything to just kind of fit and make sure I can hear everything, at least to get me started. I'll add in this bass over here, see how this is sounding. And so now I have no context, so let me add in a couple more elements. This acoustic guitar comes in here, only in this section. And this synth bass sounds kind of horrible in some parts, so I'm probably going to need to like tune this and do some editing, see after I get a balance, maybe I address that, because there's already like a lot of rub in the low end between just these two elements. But we can deal with that in the future, like next week or 2 weeks from now, if I was breaking this up over the 4 weeks. So that's good for now. And we got this outro solo. Yeah, so this is a more melodic point of interest, so I'll bring that up a little bit. It is like a DI sounding guitar, it's pretty flat, so when it comes to effects and whatnot, I'm gonna have to work on that a lot, but at least I can hear what's going on now. Yep, and then I'll come back, add in some of these aux percussions. I'm just gonna bring these down to start because I know aux percussion always like shreds my ears right off the bat. So I'm just going to start with this a little bit lower and just protect myself. Add in the cowbell. Shaker. Now these are two things that live in similar areas and they're doing similar jobs, so let me just pan them off each other, give them a little bit of space. I don't need them super wide because I want them a little bit more centered. You don't always just have to pan things like 100 to the left, 100 to the right. You can place them in the stereo field. And they have gotten perceptually louder as soon as I pan them a little bit, and that's just because they're not fighting with as many things down the middle. So now that they have a little bit of their own space, they are a little bit louder, and you'll just have to bring them down in volume a little bit more. Yeah, so that's fine for now. I treat aux percussion a little bit more of just like texture kind of stuff, just building the rhythms. I don't really want them as focal points either, but they are like interesting things that come in and out. So I don't need them super loud. I'm bringing them down a fair amount. Let me add in this vocal chop. And I'll leave the vocal chop in the middle. It's a little bit lower frequency. I might pan it off of the lead vocal if I feel like it's fighting it. And now that we have everything in but the lead vocal, we'll just unsolo everything and then just click play.
Já faz algum tempo que eu não te vejo. Me bateu saudade daquele teu beijo.
And I'm already getting like some level differences, so as I play this through trying to get a global level, I'll also clip gain this a bit. This is quieter than the other portions.
Que eu não te vejo. Me bateu saudade daquele teu beijo. Me perco nas memórias. Me lembro das histórias que sempre te contei. Já faz algo que eu não te bateu saudade, que eu não te vejo. Me batei. Tô aqui pensando naquele jeito que nós nos.
Alright, and here we have the vocalist not being consistent with distance from the mic, so we're getting both a tone change and a level change. So we might have to address that in the next week with EQ, because she is getting closer to the microphone, so we're getting more of a proximity effects and also more level. This can be done pretty creatively recording, but we'll have to keep an eye on that now that we've already seen that. Maybe later in the song, like mid-verse, she's moving on and off the mic, and maybe that doesn't function in a creative way like a section change like this, where we're going from a verse to a chorus or a hook, where having a tonal change is cool, but we're going to want to keep the levels moderately consistent. So we have a global level set, so I'm just going to gain this down a little bit and see if it smooths it out. Alright, so I'll leave this lead in how it is. Pull this down a little bit more. Alright, that is already significantly smoother, and then I'll just jump around back and forth, make sure things are consistent across the board.
Depois das vezes em que nós brigamos, a intensidade cima fazendo do jeito que só tu sabia. Lembro das histórias, memórias. Me perco nas memórias, saudade e eu não te vejo. Eu não te vejo. Memórias. Depois das vezes nós brigamos, a intensidade era 1000 vezes 100. Beijo de língua mordendo o pescoço, tu vinha por cima fazendo do jeito que só tu sabia. Tua boca teu cheiro não tem pra ninguém. Nos amamos depois das vezes mordendo o pescoço que só tu sabia. Ando naquele jeito que nós nos amamos depois das vezes em que nós brigamos, a intensidade era 1000 vezes 100. Beijo de língua mordendo o pescoço. Já faz algum tempo.
Alright, so that smooths it out a little bit, and that, also relieves some of the, like, drasticness of the tonal change as well. So, now that we have a balance, before we continue, I'm just going to go ahead and get the tempo and place some markers and just listen through. It's always a good idea just to like listen through and see what the song is and how you want to serve the song before you start making like real mix decisions. Right now we just have everything organized and balanced to a point and panned off of each other where we can actually get an idea of what's going on and we can actually listen. So I have my MIDI controls up here. I'll just press play and tap. So we got 60 BPM. We're looking on the grid here. I got my grid to a quarter. I'll switch it to an eighth. We're looking pretty good at the start of the song. We'll jump towards the end and we are still on the grid on the downbeats, so we probably hit this first try. If you fall off the grid later in the song, that's a big tell of you are very close, but you need to up or down the tempo by like 1 or 2 BPM. So, if I was off, I could switch it to 61 or 59 and see if it lines up the grid a little bit more. But now that I got that, I can just start placing markers, FN enter, or the plus sign here, or numeric enter on a Mac keyboard. So I'm on a MacBook, so FN return. I can do intro or verse 1. She kind of just hops right into the song. And then I know that up until this section change, and now we're at a hook. So I'll put a hook or chorus, and then come out of it. And then we're in like a little post chorus. Cool, and I'll start this bar. Let me switch to grid mode. We have this little like drop out to like enter the second verse, but I'm going to start the second verse here because she's already getting into it, and I can see visually we can just hop ahead here towards the end of the verse. Then we enter a bridge section here. So I will drop another marker, bridge section. And I still need to listen through the vocals from here. Já faz algum tempo que eu não te vejo. Me bateu saudade daquele teu beijo. Me perco nas memórias. Me lembro das histórias que sempre te contei. Pensando naquele jeito que nós nos amamos depois das vezes em que nós brigamos, a intensidade era 1000 vezes 100. Beijo de língua moda. And here she is switching her mic position again drastically and also using more breath. So let me gain this up. This falls flat a little bit. Lembro das histórias que sempre te contei. Pensando naquele jeito que nós nos amamos depois das vezes em que nós brigamos, a intensidade era 1000 vezes 100. Beijo de... Tô aqui pensando naquele jeito que nós nos amamos depois das vezes em que nós brigamos, a intensidade era 1000 vezes 100. Tô aqui
pensando naquele jeito que nós nos amamos. Depois das vezes em que nós brigamos, a intensidade era 1000 vezes 100.
And we're running out of breath a little bit here, so I'll bump up the second half and this last little line.
Tô aqui pensando naquele jeito que nós nos amamos. Depois das vezes em que nós brigamos, a intensidade era 1000 vezes 100. Beijo de língua mordendo o pescoço, tu vinha por cima fazendo do jeito que só tu sabia. Tua boca, teu cheiro não tem pra 1000 vezes 100. Beijo de língua mordendo o pescoço, tu vinha por cima fazendo do jeito que só tu sabia. Tua boca, teu cheiro não tem pra ninguém. Tô aqui pensando naquele jeito que nós nos amamos. Depois das vezes em que nós brigamos, a intensidade era 1000 vezes 100. Beijo de língua mordendo o pescoço, tu vinha por cima fazendo do jeito que só tu sabia. Tua boca, teu cheiro não tem pra ninguém.
And we're into an outro. Cool. Yeah, and when it comes to something like this guitar solo, I'll try to level it about the same perceptual volume as the vocal, since it's like taking over as the melodic interest. This is just something I like. It's a personal preference. You know, you could do something a little different. You could have the guitar like absolutely ripping afterwards, or you can have it come in a little bit quieter and sit it in the mix a little bit more. But at this point, we have the lead vocals kind of chopped up a little bit and leveled a little bit. So this would make like our one track in the directions where we need to do some clip gain. You know, feel free to do that with other instrumentation. It's not going to be so prevalent in something like these kick and snare samples where they're samples, so they're going to be pretty consistent across the board probably. The bass is like fine. Any kind of dynamic stuff I'm gonna smooth out with compression later, in which you'll be able to do in a week or two when we cover EQ and compression. Guitars as well. I'll end up doing a lot of dynamics kind of stuff just with compression instead of chopping it up. Unless there's like a specific part where there's like one note that sticks out a lot, you could chop that and pull that down or up. And again, as a review for the clip gain, you can either come in and grab this little slider and move it up and down, or if you highlight the clip and hold Control and Shift and then the up or down arrows, you can go in half dB intervals, which is what I've been doing for most of the video. And you know, it's really hard to hear like 0.1 dB, if you know you can even hear that at all. That's debatable on whether like a human being can hear 0.1 dB difference, but you can hear half a dB like really well a lot of times, especially with like clip gain. So half dB intervals are pretty nice. It's a smaller interval, but it does make a difference. You can move it up and down and kind of smooth everything out. But we're looking pretty good now. We've got everything routed to our submix. We got our master. We have the click available to us. I have it turned off right now. There's not really any timing or performance issues that I heard that I'm going to need to like really do a ton of editing. Again, a lot of this stuff's on the grid. It's a modern genre. There's like vocal rushing or anything. You could just, you know, solo the vocal with a click, or you just solo the vocal with the drums, kind of slide things around. There's some tuning stuff with the vocals, with the bass, that I'm going to need to tackle at some point. And I could be placing markers as well, like FN return and like tune bass. Or maybe I would just say guitar if there was like a bad guitar note. And then when I go to this guitar memory location, I'll just be able to listen for like that 5-second before and after my marker, and then I'll probably hear what it is again. Or you can do like guitar squeak or something, and then just let yourself know on these first pass-throughs anything that you're hearing that's an issue that you can come back to later for the editing portions of mixing. And Mixing could be, majority editing depending on the performance, or it could be very minimal editing, depending on the genre, the quality of players. Something like this, this organ is probably MIDI. These synth stabs, the guitar was played, this bass was played, but then you have a ton of samples, so you're not going to really need to do a ton of editing in something like this when you're handed stems. Um, but there is like some tuning that needs done, and so you can just make notes to yourself, so as you go you can work, and not forget, and you can like be on the lookout for some of those things. Yeah, so then we can just review, make sure we hit everything, renames, created buses, added colors, markers, did the tempo, master, sort for track noises. This is going to be more prevalent in acoustic recordings like jazz, folk, singer-songwriter, that kind of stuff. And we can go ahead and just do a file save as. So we'll just work in the same session directory every single week. So you can just have the same session directory, but you'll have a different PTX file for each week. So we'll do Control Command S or File Save As, and we'll create a new PTX, and we'll just call this Rough Mix. We'll save that in our session directory. Now we're working on a new PTX file. You can see the name at the top change, and when it comes time for like the EQ compression, you'll do another file save as, call that EQ compression instead of Rough Mix. We used clip gain. We did leveling, Rough Mix, only doing levels and pan. If you have more instrumentation, you can do more panning. One thing that I did notice that I wanted to do, so this electric guitar 1 and 2 are playing something that just needs more space, like they're a little on top of each other in this second verse. I want the electric guitar just, at this point in the mix, just like dead center for now, but I'll move this one a little bit off to the left to give more space to the guitar going in the right. So if we play it,
Já faz algum tempo.
here's guitar 1 and guitar 2. So they're both playing a little bit more similar of a line here, so I can just select this portion, instead of waveform, go to pan, and if I make this just a little bit bigger so you can see, now that we have the selection, I can just use this bar, click and drag, and move it to the left. I'll move it like 50 off. So now that when we play it, now they're off of each other and they have a little bit more space. Again, with automation, you can hold command and click to create a breakpoint, hold option and click to remove a breakpoint. And there's a lot of dead space in the guitar performance, so you don't really have to worry about like a big jump while the guitar is like holding out a sustained note. If it's something like this and you're adjusting the panning, maybe you do something really quick like this, or maybe you need more space to smooth it out. Moving things in a stereo field can be like pretty apparent to the listener, so you could do something creative like sweeping a guitar back and forth if you want it, where like a second guitar comes in like this and you want to pan the first guitar out of the middle to make room. This is a little bit more sparse, so it's going to be more noticeable, so you might need to do like a smaller pan to make this less noticeable and just get it out of the middle and be less jarring and like less of a thing, just make it feel a little bit more natural to the listener. But again, in this, there's a lot of dead space. You can make these like very abrupt pan changes, and it's not going to affect the mix at all. Switch this back to waveform, and you can also listen for the levels between the two. Now that you've moved it off center, the level, like the perceptual level, might change a little bit. So slight adjustment, bounces a little bit better. And we've got clip gain. We'll want to make sure our master does not clip. So we'll click play.
Beijo de língua mordendo o pescoço.
And we've got pretty good headroom here on our master.
Beijo de
We've got like -6 for our like main peaks, and we're leaving ourselves a little bit of room so we aren't risking clipping. If you are clipping, you can use the all and bring the volume down. If you've already made your bus routing, it will bring the volume of everything down. So alternatively, you could just make a group called like tracks. Just select all your tracks, call it like tracks, and then you could bring down the volume of everything.
beijo de língua mordendo o pescoço. Vinha por cima.
And now we've given ourselves way more headroom. If things were running really loud,
Beijo de língua mordendo o pescoço. Vinha por cima fazendo do jeito que só.
now we are clipping internally, denoted by the yellows in the submix and the red in the master. And this means we are clipping digitally, like internally, so we are just chopping off the transients, and this is going to lead to digital distortion. It's not super apparent in what we just heard. The main thing I was hearing was just a volume difference, but this is going to be more of an issue. The more clipping that you do, we were only clipping by like a dB and a half. To remove our clips, we can do Option C, or you can just click on the little red thing, and we can bring our volume back down to where it was for our little mix. We can play it again,
Beijo de língua mordendo.
and you can just bring the volume down and make sure you don't clip. And clearing the clips resets it, so you can see if you are still clipping and you need to bring it down further. And yeah, finally we'll just need to make a selection of our track and make a bounce. So one thing I like to do with all of my mixes is in slip mode, right before anything starts, give myself a little bit of space, place a marker, call it start, and then come to the very end, listen. So about like here would be a decent end point, and I'll place one that's called end. And now we can just make a selection between our markers. So I'll select the start marker, hold shift, go to the end marker, and option command B or file bounce mix. And I can call this just rough mix. And I will want to do MP3. This is just something for the client to listen at home. File format, interleaved, multiple mono will give me a separate mono file for the left and the right channel. This is going to give me a stereo file. I'll do an offline bounce. Click bounce. Does it super fast. And then I will want to just check to make sure everything worked properly. I will Command S, Command Shift W to close the session. Now I can come into my session directory, make sure everything is there. I've got my new PTX file, I've got all my audio files, and I have my bounce file. And I will play this to make sure it actually rendered properly. Cool. So it plays. Nothing's more embarrassing than giving your client something that is just digital silence. So it's just a nice little check, make sure you did that correctly. But now you can just zip your file and submit the whole session. Email me with any questions.